Welcome back to Clarify Everything, the podcast where Matt and Shane dive deep into the world of technology, artificial intelligence, and cutting edge science. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a curious thinker, or just trying to keep up with the fast paced world of innovation, we have you covered. Each episode brings you the latest breakthroughs, expert insights, and fun discussion on the topic. As always, I'm your host, Shane Kirk, joined by one Mr. Matt Barry. Oh my God. Just as a preface, we had the most technical malfunctions from Zoom we've ever experienced. Um, I don't know what
It's
Zoom's doing over
entirely
there.
operator error. It's 100%
I don't know.
Zoom's fine. Don't be bashing Zoom. Zoom's doing good
Dude,
work.
Zoom.
But
Okay, will you at least admit that Zoom is the meta business suite of recording software where everything you need to fix is just you can't find it?
I agree with that. Like it needs some UI help. Like there's definitely a workflow thing. It's much better than it used to be. And honestly, if we compare the apples to apples and you look at like WebEx teams from
Yeah.
Cisco and Microsoft teams and all these other different options, they're all terrible. So it's really just pick one that works pretty well and just learn that one and then just hope they eventually figure out their quirks. But Zoom has done some pretty good stuff in security space. The quality seems to be pretty good, provided that the users don't screw it up, and
Yeah, I guess
then
that's fair.
everything seems pretty good.
All right. Couple of updates on the podcast itself. We have officially hit 41 viewers on Spotify, which is super cool.
There's
I
so
think
many
that's
now.
We have an official audience size of 12. And so if you were here about 2 weeks ago, we made a joke that all seven listeners were going to make fun of us. Now it's 12, all right? We're almost double the size of laughter in the room.
Right. If we continue increasing at this rate, we will have the entire population of the planet Earth that will be fans and listeners in about 3 weeks.
In about,
But
yeah, in about
that's
3 weeks.
not how exponential growth works, in case anybody's wondering.
All right. Enough gabbing here. The biggest thing I wanted to talk to you about or pick your brain about, and I think our listeners will be interested as well, is this supposed cybersecurity attack or a hack on Twitter slash X that Elon Musk, the man himself, has claimed Ukraine was behind it. And so
Uh-huh.
here's my thing. My question as a what they call a marketing person or a business person, just an all-around non-technical entity.
Uh-huh.
Uh, what I know that they traced the IP addresses to the Ukraine. I understand or whatever, but
Uh-huh.
what's stopping someone from just you know, hacking them using like a VPN that says they're in Ukraine so that the Elon Musk slash Trump administration like thinks that they're being attacked by the Ukraine. You know what
There's
I mean?
so many things wrong with this statement. I don't even know where to start. I don't even know how to unpack it. So I'm just gonna start from the top and just like Christmas, just grab something and just start tearing and throwing it in places. So let's talk about a cyber attack before we do anything else. This is like saying, in World War II, we were arguing over lunch. Like there's so many different kinds and so many different things happen, but specifically what the scientists and the researchers, some of the best cybersecurity researchers on the planet, are actually saying is that it was a DDoS attack, which is a distributed denial of service.
hmm
And the easiest way to understand a denial of service is you just send so much information that eventually the server just tells you to fuck off. Like
Oh, so they
it's
just
just
turned off Twitter in Ukraine? Wait,
no,
what?
no, 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 no. You've only scratched the surface. You've only scratched the surface. So if you owned a website of
hmm
some type, Shane's like Shane.com, which I think Dolly Parton should probably buy that and turn that into her website before anybody else does. But that's just me. Love Dolly, wanted to go out and take over the world. If you had a website, Shane.com, and some asshole somewhere decided that they didn't want Shane.com to be up, they'd use a computer and they would continually send the same request over and over to the website. Whether that request is something stupid and boring, like clicking a button, or something advanced, like I'm going to send the wrong password 35 gajillion times until something breaks. Eventually, the server that is behind your website is going to get so overwhelmed with requests, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to sit there like a dumb shit and just not move because there's so many requests stacked up in a line that the server's not able to work. Now that's a denial of service. You keep sending the same request over and over again. Most relatively decent web-based tools, application-based tools, things like that have decent DOS protection. Like they'll find the IP that is sending that and just block it, and then it just bounced off a wall for like 9,000 years. What makes DDoS, distributed denial of service, so interesting is that it's not just one IP. There's a
Oh my
whole
God.
bunch.
It's like a
So and they,
thousands.
yeah, thousands, millions a lot of the time. And they're all over the place and they're sending this all in one spot. So the same command at the same time is coming in the same direction. And when you start getting into some advanced hacky shit, you start getting
Mhm.
into like coordinated distributed denial of service, where there's each of these is sending a different type of command. So if one of them happens to go through, the next one gets blocked and so on and so forth. So you end up with a place where the servers just give up the ghost. They forget it. They're just not going to do anything. And every once in a while, your command, if you want to bring up the website, will get through.
Right.
It pops in there. And then, oh, hey, the front page loaded. It must be coming back. No, it's not. It just means that that one command that you got through happened to show up because there's a jillion other commands that may or may not be blocked or shut off or routed somewhere else. The big guns, your AWS, your Google, your Microsoft, your Akamai, your Cloudflare, your DigitalOcean, the list goes on, that are hosting websites, they've got layers of DDoS protection. If something comes flying in there all over the place, then they're able to kind of segment that out and block those IPs and systematically start shutting things off. There's a lot of automation that happens in there, which protects those sites if they get marauded by these giant tidal waves of requests. Brian Krebs, who's a well-known security researcher, and in every possible positive way is a total loudmouth. Will call out all the bad guys, will call out when people do stupid shit, is kind of the definitive security researcher, publisher, journalist in that space. He was DDoSed at one point with what is estimated, although it was never proven, was a billion hosts that were firing at his website in real time, and like Google broke, and he had to like move around and do some other stuff, and now he's fairly well protected. That's what happens when you out a bunch of bad actors that are trying to do something kind of terrible. So now that we understand what DDoS is and how it works, it is one of the most common attacks when you're going against something large, because you're just going to fire this whole truckload of
Yeah.
commands at something that's going to break it down. Happens pretty frequently, in fact. But in order to launch a DDoS attack requires a million hosts. You need a million computers to do this. And it's not just going to be your cell phone with one click. It has to happen over and over and over again, which means the device has to have pretty specialized software on it. It has to be doing very few other things. So it's not like you can just pick a random million computers from all over the place. They
Yeah.
have to not be busy. They have to have good routing traffic. They have to be able to reach that site. They have to be able to reach it pretty quickly. So they
Mhm.
can't just bounce all around the world to get there. Otherwise, that's going to get blocked or at other routing locations.
Mhm.
There's some pretty advanced complexity to do, excuse me, to do some of this. So a botnet is a group of robotic operators in a network that have been co-opted by bad actors to send out those commands on a pretty regular basis. The larger the botnet, the more damage you can do in a DDoS, the longer you can keep things down. Now, ultimately, a DDoS isn't going to brick a system. Like it's not going to
Yeah.
completely shut the thing off. It's going to stop a lot. Eventually, you're going to block that traffic and you're going to identify where it's coming from and you're going to be able to kind of shut off some edges and things like that. But the whole point behind a DDoS is not to brick the system. There's a bunch of other ways to do that if they really wanted to. The point behind a DDoS is to send a message, is to
Right.
get in the way, to say, hey, we can stop this from happening. Like you're vulnerable. You need to put up better firewalls, and that's a radical oversimplification because there's a lot of other tools that are in there that can do
Yeah.
it. But it's really more to like fire a shot across the bow to be like, hey, we're gonna hit you. Like this is how we're gonna hit you. Um, Stating that a country that is at war with a very large, very powerful nation decided to divest resources
Yeah.
to DDoS a service that at this point is better than half bots anyway, that are all Russian propaganda, kind of tells you what was the point? Why would
Right.
they devote all that energy and time? And honestly, if most of those queries were coming from Ukraine, why didn't your cybersecurity operators just kind of click a button and say block all queries coming from Ukraine? And then everything would be back up in about 5 seconds. So admittedly, there's some additional complications to that, but if you are a website such as X that has that level of traffic and that level of content and that level of activity, there should be some cybersecurity operators there with some pretty sophisticated technology and some pretty sophisticated processes, so that if this kind of attack comes, as Elon said it did, on a regular basis, quote, we're attacked all the time, unquote, then there should be methods for dealing with
Right.
something. So the part we haven't heard is the scope. If you're
Mhm.
attacked all the time and suddenly this one, shut down traffic on the site for several hours multiple times throughout the day, then what made this one different? And why Ukraine, who is frequently being touted as not having sophisticated enough technology to develop this level of cyber warfare, being the only nation that is being targeted as the result of this. Most of the
Right.
time, distributed denial of service attacks cover the globe. IPs from all over the world because that's what makes them able to work. Otherwise, you could just block a country, which is
Mhm.
quite literally a checkbox in most DDoS protection software. Block Ukraine, and then just stops. And like there's nothing left. There's
Right.
everything coming out of Ukraine just hits a wall and just disappears, and your service keeps functioning as normal. So as we break this apart, let's take a look at some of the more interesting aspects of it very quickly, and then I'll sum up with what the answer probably is. So if it was just Ukraine, and as Elon said, it was just Ukraine trying to DDoS us, then unless you have monkeys that are actually operating in your cybersecurity center, you should just be able to click a button and stop it. If it was actually distributed denial of service, that is a very difficult thing, but that implies that whoever the attacker was had a significant number of resources at their disposal to be
Right.
able to come in and beat you up so bad that this could come down because it happens on a pretty regular basis. So it is no secret to everybody that listens to our podcast, all 41 now, to everybody that listens, that I think Elon's an idiot. So there's nothing imaginary about that. So coming out and accusing a sovereign nation of instigating an attack against a publicly held organ, well, not publicly anymore, against a prominent technology organization is dangerous. So that's slanderous. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Were there IP addresses from Ukraine? Probably, because Ukraine has computers. So I mean, it makes sense if you're going to co-opt some of the botnet there. But the part that I think would be much more potent about this is something that actually appeared on Twitter's website, or X's website, excuse me, several times, as well as on Reddit and a few other places, which we can post in the video when Shane is putting together, which is a banner from the hacktivist group Anonymous that said they specifically orchestrated this attack and they broke Twitter and it was not Ukraine. So it's all over the place. It's on Reddit. You can Google it. You could see all kinds of stuff. One of Anonymous's classic lines is "expect us," and at this point, I don't think anybody did because they've been quiet for a while. So all of a sudden, Twitter goes black, and Rocket Jesus over here starts saying, "Oh, hey, it's coming from Ukraine. It was Ukraine. It's always Ukraine."
Right.
Ukraine's fucking busy, man. They don't have time to be hacking your website and stuff like that. On the other hand, you have an organization that showed up with the technical savvy and capability when they decide to bring it to bear to absolutely bury you, and you didn't once call it out.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think Ukraine had anything to do with it. I think that's not only far-fetched, but kind of technologically challenging. Although there probably were a number of IP addresses coming out of Ukraine, that's not necessarily their MO. I kind of get the feeling that if Ukrainian gangsters actually wanted to do something to X, they'd probably show up with hatchets versus actually sending
And
some
jumpsuits.
DDoS. That's where a bunch of guys in tracksuits would show up and just mess up your life versus doing a DDoS attack. And on top of that, those guys are super busy defending their homeland. They don't give a shit about what's going
Oh
on
God.
X right now.
Dude, if you get a faint smell of vodka anywhere near you, you better run, Elon
Right,
Musk,
you better make
dude.
tracks, man. You don't want to.
Dude,
So no, I don't think Ukraine had
suede
anything to do
jumpers
with
are
it.
on the way.
Right, man. It's gonna be like a bunch of guys in Adidas are gonna show up with a moving van.
Dude, if you smell Russian cigarettes and snus, dude, you better run.
It's time to go.
All right, so that explains a lot because I personally here the thing is when I come to this podcast, as most of you know, I do the bare minimum research on purpose. Like I look up headlines and I go, I want to hear what Matt says because I don't want to come into it and be like, oh yeah, like I know the details, like let's just lob this up. Like, you know what I mean? I want to hear it. Like and personally, like frankly, like my Twitter feed is not cybersecurity stuff. So I saw it online and I was like, wow, this is a great thing to ask Matt. And so I didn't actually know that this was apparently claimed by Anonymous or whatever. So in my head, this was my thinking before about 30 seconds ago. Just from like a detective's hat point of view, like I just go, okay, who wants to hurt Ukraine?
Right.
Like, think about it this way. The way I thought about this, I was like, all right, to basically DDoS Twitter or X or whatever you want. I call it Twitter, bro. I stand with Twitter personally.
Hey, hey, stop dead naming X.
Yeah,
Okay.
whoa,
You
whoa,
know,
whoa. I'm
don't
gonna
don't
get
be
banned
dead
on
naming
Twitter. I'm
X.
gonna
Whoa, whoa,
get,
don't be doing
but
that. Don't be calling X Twitter. That's dead naming it. Don't do that. Oh no, it's terrible. Anyway, so about Twitter.
yeah.
So
So I was of the mind, I was like, listen, like I kind of understand what virtual machines do. I was just like, all right, there's probably like a server farm somewhere with just a million virtual machines who are just like all working together basically to just attack Twitter.
right.
And so in my head, I'm like, for anyone who is like any knows anything about how hacking works or cybersecurity, and I know literally the bare minimum, like I was like, if they all come from Ukraine, that's an obvious bait. Like if every IP
Mm-hmm.
would be randomized, every IP would come
Mm-hmm.
from anywhere in the world. Like they'd probably come from my house, like just randomly, someone stole my IP
Yeah.
address. You know what I mean? Like just in some data leak or something. And I was like, okay, if 100 or even 90% come from Ukraine, in my head, I'm like, that's obviously like framed. Like
Yep.
obviously someone is going like trying to make this look like Ukraine did that.
Right.
And so then, just from like deductive reasoning here, I'm like, who does not like Ukraine, right? Who's anti-Ukraine?
Yeah.
But then I was like, all right, it's not anti-Ukraine, but who's anti the U.S. being involved in Ukraine because Elon's so close to Trump, right? And I was
Yep.
like, all right, this is that high level thinking here, that
Mm-hmm.
deductive reasoning and stuff. So I was like, Russia probably doesn't want the U.S.
I don't know.
supporting Ukraine. I mean, I don't know any Chinese, diplomats or anything like that, but I would assume that they probably don't want us in there. I don't know. And I was just like, basically, pull a number out of the hat. That country probably doesn't want us in Ukraine,
Yep.
whether it be a world power for like tactical reasons or the Europeans just because they don't want us in Europe. Whatever it is, they probably don't want us there. And so, just based on that knowledge alone, I'm going, it's literally anyone except Ukraine.
Right.
It could literally be the French, and I would believe that before
Right.
Ukraine. Like I would be like, oh, Trump said the French president's wife's a man or something like that, and I believe that's a reason over just being like
Yeah.
Ukrainians did it. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and
Like,
that's standard logic and critical thinking. That's what we're talking about. Like, let's look at this logically before we say some utterly, exhaustively dumb shit on social media. Like, oh, this was Ukraine's fault. Now, admittedly, in Rocket Jesus' defense, um, he did not say it's from Ukraine or it was
yeah,
Ukraine. The actual tweets and things that popped out that said he was investigating where some of the IPs were from Ukraine. So before we go down this rabbit hole saying that, we blame
right.
Ukraine for everything, but the sheer idiocy of calling that out on a social platform, that's like
Mhm.
saying yeah, some of the IPs were probably from Ohio. Does that mean that Ohio is trying to, destroy Twitter? It's
The
like,
Rust Belt hates you.
right, right. Seriously, Oklahoma's out to destroy X.
Dude, the
It's
swing
like,
states that won Trump the election want you
right,
gone. Like,
right. Pennsylvania DDoSes X. It's like, it's like, why are you saying this incendiary bullshit and stuff like that? And the answer is
dude.
because it's incendiary bullshit.
Right.
But you get a bunch of these, mouth breather, one step from Neanderthal morons who are walking around saying, oh, yeah, well, this is some 4D chess bullshit. No, it's not. This is that. First of
Oh
all,
God.
it would take a computer to win 4D chess. I actually want to see that. I think
True.
it'd be really cool. Second, how would it be 4D chess? I can see 3D chess, but not 4D chess. Anyway, before we go down
Well,
that
isn't
rabbit
chess
hole,
already 3D?
yeah, but you're working in two dimensions. You're moving in your L and your X. But if you've
Yeah, but
added
like,
another one,
I don't know.
it's stop. You're going to hurt yourself. So it's, but the point of the comments is to be incendiary and to do exactly what's happening right now. To have smart people break it down. You'd ask the question that you did and think to yourself, like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. And then create the discourse, and then that becomes part of the public conversation. And then it goes forward. And at some point, we're still sitting here talking about the world's strangest human being, not the richest human being, because in case you haven't noticed, Tesla is still in this mad spiral downward on the
Mhm.
stock market and will likely end up creating an impact crater bigger than the Gulf of Mexico when it actually hits the bottom. Yes, the Gulf of Mexico, not the Gulf of
We're
America.
dead naming the Gulf of America, bro.
We're just dead naming everything at this point. We're just going to keep dead naming. We're just going to
Dude.
dead name it across the board. But the the point is the incendiary comment, but incendiary comments have consequences.
Right.
In whether that consequence comes from you're wasting 5 minutes of security researchers' time who are trying
Mhm.
to figure out where this came from to prevent a larger scale attack or something on another system, and they're actually looking at Ukraine because of a comment that was associated with that. If we have enough researchers do that, that wasted 5 minutes turns into tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, which could then lead to additional damage. There is a level of responsibility when one is at a high level of public esteem or public regard to be able to say things that can be reasonably assumed to be true,
Right.
instead of just saying things to piss people off. Trolling is something you do on 4chan or Reddit forums. It is not something you do when you are making a
Okay.
national level comment. I
Right,
do it.
right.
I'll troll the shit out of people on Reddit. But when you're saying something that is supposed to be purported as fact or even as a reasonable suspicion, there should
Mhm.
be some intelligence behind it. And without that, you end up in a position where now people are actually asking the question, wait, did Ukraine DDoS Twitter? I mean, really? They got some shit to do. They're not concerned with
Yeah.
DDoSing right now. People are being shot in the streets in Kiev. So it's like we need to think more about that than about,
Oh
no, man,
God.
screw this Elon guy.
Dude, oh my God. The war in the Ukraine, like, I'm gonna shift gears here in a second, guys. But put in perspective, the war in Ukraine's what, 4 years old now?
Three. So it's heading toward
Three?
four. Yeah.
To put this in perspective, guys, I was like 1 year out of high school when the war in Ukraine started. Like, basically my entire adult life we've been fighting in Ukraine.
Yep.
Like, this is like honestly just insane. Like,
Yeah. And that's how it should be. There should be a view of insanity around war that lasts this amount of time. In the past, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, things like that, we'd see wars that lasted 10, 15 years and the death tolls would be enormous. But we like to think, and we should think, that we've evolved as humans.
right.
And by evolving as humans, that we don't want to engage in wars that take hundreds of years and cost thousands of lives and, continue to make everybody miserable. We want to act as strong, capable, independent nations that are still able to exchange and interoperate with the nations around us. I mean, Ukraine grows food.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other things
And
that Ukraine
titanium.
does, but Ukraine, yeah, and titanium. But Ukraine provides food. And, by damaging the country, with unexploded munitions and dead bodies and chemicals and all these other problems that we're struggling with, you're damaging a food supply that is
Mhm.
critical across the board. And it just doesn't make sense from a fundamental
Right.
standpoint to continue engaging in action like that unless you are trying to be dominant. And that's what Russia's trying to do. And I'm not going to try and speak to the politics around any of that. I
Yeah.
could, but I'd probably piss a lot of people off. But the reality is things need to change. We all know that. We all talk about it, but like what is actually going to change? And arguably nothing as long as Ukraine is DDoSing Twitter. You know, they're not doing anything.
Oh man. All right. So I wanted to switch gears. So a while back, you guys didn't actually hear this, but we had recorded an episode that like the file got corrupted or something happened, it came out bad or whatever. And in that episode, we had basically started a segment talking about new business ideas, right? Ideas where I personally come up with business ideas. I'm just a business guy, probably 12 a week. And so this time I'm gonna ask Matt a few about some of his or about my ideas, what he thinks. But in the future, I assume most of you guys are founders or entrepreneurs or interested in making things, tinkerers, let's say. Send in your ideas and we'll review them on the show. You're at Matt and Shane at clarify-tech.com. So this one's a little bit different. Okay. Uh, I was searching the business for sale sites as I normally do, and I found one for a boba shop in Sacramento. Okay. And the boba shop was for sale for about $190,000. Cash flowed between 30 and 40 grand a month, right? It profit margin at about, let's say, with overhead, say 30%, right? And so the thing is this was a no name, like no brand, just a plain boba shop, like a mom and pop shop. They just happen to sell boba. And so for me, I'm kind of thinking about this. I was like, man, this might be an interesting place where you could step into a current business and differentiate through marketing, right? Differentiate through product, or maybe not product because like boba is a common thing, but product quality at like a great price. And so here's my idea. You come in with like a brand strategy to take this to a next level and franchise, right? But you start out with essentially you take this boba idea where it's thought of as a high like price item commodity and you still do the high quality items but you undercut your sale or you undercut your competition to compete directly with coffee instead, right? And so most boba places, especially if you're doing like matcha or anything like that, it's like super premium, right? And so you spend like 12 bucks a drink or 10 bucks a drink, right? So what if you come in with a like a high level branding strategy, whatever it is, and it's a mom and pop business, brick and mortar already done, and you come in and you go, you know what, we're doing premium Japanese matcha or whatever at $6 a cup instead of $12 a cup because your cost of business is still low. Like the markup on boba is like 200%. Like it's insane. And so I just want to hear your thoughts on this.
So the concept of undercutting the competition at the risk of running loss is nothing new. It's an intelligent business move. It happens frequently. Um, but from a truly, unicorn level, skyrocketing business kind of standpoint, if you do not create a product and create the idea around that product that consumers need your product, whereas
Mhm.
their lives will not be complete without it, then you've you are constantly going to be in competition not only with yourself but with other businesses that are creating that
Right.
product that is needed. Um, let's look at the natural competition for a boba shop, which would be the other 796,314 boba shops that are going to be about
Right.
4 feet away from it. Are those chains? Are they, can they afford to undercut you when you
Mhm.
step in and identify a market that's there and actually makes sense? And one of the pieces of purchasing a functioning business that is frequently overlooked in that profit schema is the cost of the debt that the business immediately
Yeah.
acquires with the purchase price. So if we view the business as a separate entity, the business is a being. It's whatever we want to label it as. That business makes a choice,
Mhm.
to continue existing in that space, and then you make a decision as the controller of that business to acquire debt. Now, that debt is the purchase price. but
Hmm.
you as the controller of the business are now part of the business. So that business has to pay off that debt that it just
Right.
acquired in purchasing the business. Whether that comes out of your personal resources, oh, I'm going to take my savings and spend $190,000 and buy this business, or you get a loan or something like that,
Hmm.
that those resources have to be replenished. So that's going to cut your margin a little bit,
Right.
your percentage of profit.
So cutting
And
your
if the
margin on the product is just like a double cut, basically.
Yeah, so you're cutting deeper than that. So it's how deep can you cut? And then that also represents a risk because you don't know for sure that if you cut that deep, if you have a customer base that's going to be interested in that product, you'd have to examine your existing
Right.
customer base. Do you have a bunch of local neighborhood people that like want to go to that shop because they like the mom and pop feel, and they're going to be pissed off when mom and pop leave because they think they're an integral part of that business. So
Right.
without mom or pop behind the counter, are they going to get the same feeling? Are you going to acquire the same customers? So there's some risks associated with that. The strategy is sound. You always want to be able to move to undercut. And if you can find a way to do that with new tools, and those tools don't necessarily have to be crazy technological tools. It could just be like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, we're getting matcha for cheaper, so we can sell it for 2% less than everybody else and actually enter that market. Um, I don't necessarily think that it would be overly challenging to sell for less or even sell for the existing price. The the populace of the United States is largely addicted to coffee at a level that's hard to even quantify. Except you can actually put numbers to it by the fact that you literally cannot walk down a block in most school towns without having three coffee shops on that same block, and they're all packed.
Yeah, they're all
You
doing
can't,
well.
they're all doing well
That's also an
because
addiction to Wi-Fi, though.
right, well, yeah, yeah, that's true. Because the common conception is don't go to the library, which also has free Wi-Fi. Go to a coffee shop because then you can spend $14 on a triple mocha milkshake thing that has this much coffee in it,
Right.
and basically drink your dessert while you're doing your homework. So the idea behind stepping into that market means you're going toe to toe with Starbucks.
Right.
And that is inherently challenging because then they have logistics and size and speed and finance and all this other stuff. So you have to find that niche. You have to find that space that Starbucks does not want to compete in, that you could then accelerate into that space and grow, which your matcha idea would actually do pretty well, but you got to run those numbers. You
Yeah.
got to actually sit down and think about it. You got to look at how many of the customers are local, how many of the
Hmm.
customers are showing up there because they want to visit mom and pop behind the counter. And then when mom and pop are gone, you have to rebuild all that goodwill and that
Yeah.
brand identity. You're going to lose some people, or you're going to lose so many that it's not going to make sense for you to undercut and you're not going to be able to generate profit. Because being able to generate 30% profit on a food product is actually really good.
Yeah.
Like if
That's
that's
why I was like, why are they
yeah.
selling? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a solid business. But then you got to ask the next question, are they retiring? Are they
yeah.
done? Do they want
That's
to
what it sounded
move?
like.
So if they're done, did the goodwill that they built up be attached to them? And will that
Mm.
disappear when they retire, even if you keep the brand the same? Because those transitions are very difficult. I mean, look at some of the big companies that have stumbled hard when their CEOs have left. The
Yeah.
founding CEO steps away. And unless that founding CEO is a total moron and has driven the company into the ground, then when they step away from a successful company, everybody says, all right, what's going to happen next?
Right.
So the same thing's going to happen in your little mom and pop shop. And if the first thing you do is show up and like, hey, here's high-end matcha for less, they're going to be like, all right, is this going to become some giant brand that like
Yeah.
doesn't give us the coffee we want or the tea we want, stuff like that. So I don't know. More data. Need to know more.
Yeah. So to follow up on this, I know we only got about 10 minutes left, but I had this other idea. All right. On the
The
boba side.
submarines. The submarine. Oh, okay, it's Boba. I
On
was
the
down
boba
for some
side.
submarines.
Some what?
Submarines. We already talked about like
Submarines, yeah.
yeah.
So I had this idea, right? We have boba, and my girlfriend, she goes, Shane, like, um, when people get boba, like, they're willing to spend more because they kind of view it as like a higher end thing, right?
Mhm.
So I go in my head, I go like this. I start, what's high end, right? What's high end? And I think tap rooms where you do flights of beers, you do
Mhm.
tastings.
Mhm.
And then I thought of omakase sushi,
Mhm.
right? So I was like, what if instead of undercutting the cost, instead of buying a brick and mortar, forget that. What like do you think it'd be possible? Not even like not even like data or anything like that. Just like do you think that there would be a market to do the highest of ends omakase style flights of tea slash boba in like a tap room, tasting room type setting?
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's no question there'd be a market for that. And well,
I don't know if there would be
yes,
here. You know what I
yes.
mean?
Well, and I think the culture of where you were trying to do a business for that, whether it's the localized culture in a town or a city or
Hmm.
the overall kind of macro culture in a nation or in an area, is really going to speak to that. Um, Creating something as a luxury brand, if you can do that, is a miracle. Because then you
Hmm.
can sell at massive profit and all kinds of other
Hmm.
crazy stuff. And you look at some of the major luxury brands, and sure, there's an like we'll take Louis Vuitton as a classic example. Those bags are probably four times as much as
Right.
what a decent high quality leather bag that doesn't have LV embossed on it is worth. But people will spend it because there is a particular type of view, of feeling, of culture that comes with the owning a Louis Vuitton bag. We could do that with, Vera Wang and a bunch of other,
Hmm.
kind of lower level brands, higher level brands, things like that, and kind of move that around. But that idea of a luxury product, of a sophisticated product, that you can always generate a market for that as long as you're delivering a sophisticated product. If you showed up and you had a Honda Accord and you're like, oh man, this is going to run with a Porsche, it damn well better run with a Porsche. Otherwise, you better
Right.
shut your mouth. Like it's not, you have to deliver on that. And no one's really going to believe that Honda's going to show up with the luxury brand. Even Honda doesn't believe that, which is
Hmm.
why they've got Acura and they've got these
Hmm.
other luxury brands they're trying to put out so that you can go, oh, Acura is Honda's luxury brand. They're going to do things differently. And I don't know. Don't quote me. Maybe they're all built in the same factory. And it's just
Yeah.
somebody who's like, oh yeah, slap the better leather on this one, and it's an Accord, but it's actually like an Acura. All right, fine, whatever. That's just kind of how marketing and brand identity works. So if you tried to do that and marketed it properly and presented it and had the ambiance and the atmosphere, like a tap room and all these other things that worked for a tea shop, absolutely. You'd have people who come in and be like, this is the best boba and best matcha. You have to
Hmm.
deliver on that. And then you have that additional markup on top of it. But that's going to be a very selective thing as far as where it is, and especially when it comes to tea.
Hmm.
Tea is frequently seen as whether you go east from us, which is weird, because we're actually going to talk about east. If you go east from us and you end up in like the UK and things like that, there's a lot of different things, as far as tea goes, but it's almost religious. You have
Right.
tea time, but they're not interested in boba and things like that.
Yeah.
Whereas you go west, which is the far east, doesn't ever make any sense when I think
Yeah.
about that
It's a
because
circle.
it's all subjective. And just in case anybody's wondering, check last week. We are 100% sure that the Earth is a sphere. So if you go west and you end up, then tea is very traditional, and the
Mhm.
types of tea, and there's a very humble presentation of tea. So when you think about that, you've got kind of a very narrow niche to deliver. But I think if marketed properly, you could in fact deliver to that niche.
Because I was thinking about this a little bit kind of like off the cuff, right? Like I was just kind of like, all right, what's this idea? And I was like, if you had like a hole in the wall shop in like San Jose, right? Down or not downtown San Jose, but like I forget what it's called, but there's like a section of San Jose that frankly is the primary people there are very, very rich Asians, right? Just saying, just like the movie. All
Yeah.
right. And if you had a shop there, there's already like the street I'm thinking of is like already like really high-end sushi places, right? And so I was envisioning in my head, I'm like, all right, what if you do like a tasting tea, all this stuff like fancy, blah blah blah, right next to like a sushi spot. You partner with them and you go, we do like just think about this like, all right, maybe you're Japanese or something like that. You got a bunch of money, date night with the wife. We're gonna go taste some tea or gonna go get some sushi. Like, I don't know, like whoever. Maybe this is one of those things like a destination thing. Like, hey, like my girlfriend's been talking to me. Like, let's go to San Jose. Let's try this thing.
I think I think I'm going to inject a little bit of my own bias in here, so hopefully
Mm,
we can tweak this a little bit. But I think that the conception that many people have of those who are rich or wealthy is that they spend more money. than those that are
Yeah,
not, that are attempting to be rich or wealthy or to appear rich or wealthy. I get the impression that a lot of truly wealthy humans, like when they go out on a date night, they want to be left alone. So they're not going to go someplace where it's crazy. And when they don't go out on a date night, they have a private chef who's making totally wholesome and wonderful things at their house. So
that's
they don't
fair.
have to think about a lot of this.
All
So then you
right,
move
all right.
down, then you move down to
Suburb
rich.
wealthy.
Then see that's now that's what I'm saying. I think there's a niche market. If you are able to, in some kind of weird fantasy VR video game type thing, walk into a restaurant like that and see the actual net worth of people like pop up over their head, I think most of them would be negative. Most of them would be like, oh yeah, I'm spending, $80,000 a year on my Mercedes Benz payment so that I can drive a Mercedes Benz.
Right.
Oh, I have two Porsches in my driveway and I'm mortgaged to the hilt and I invested all my money to try and buy on the dip and the stock market's screwing me now, so I'm going to end up being broke and have to declare bankruptcy. Like there is a definite desire in American culture to appear wealthy,
Right.
regardless of how damaging that actually is. And then we see the anecdotal images of, Bill Gates waiting in line for a hot dog, wearing a pair of Converse and khakis that he got at Target and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
It's like that guy's worth $200 billion and is buying a hot dog. So
Yeah.
it's like when you think about the habits that truly wealthy and rich people have. And this is where I think marketing becomes really important because you're actually going to market to the people that want to appear rich and wealthy. So you're
Yeah.
going to make it look like there's rich and wealthy people in there doing things so that the people that want to appear like that or want to be like, oh, hey, we went to this restaurant. It was super
Mhm.
expensive and all this stuff. So you could market to that, but you have to remember that's the niche you're marketing to, not the
Yeah. Yeah.
actual rich and wealthy. They don't care. They're gonna get more amazing boba at their house than they
Yeah.
are
That's
going
true.
out to a restaurant. So
All
just
right.
keep the
All I
culture in
heard
mind.
was if you drive a Mercedes, you're poorer than me because I drive a $4,000 Honda and don't have a credit card. Um,
That's exactly what I
basically,
said. It's exactly
I'm
what I said.
basically richer than everybody.
Exactly what I said.
Sorry. What
100%
can I
right.
say? I
100%.
actually I'm positive net worth by exactly $1, therefore I'm richer than most.
That's right. And we got all this information from Ukraine. It all
Yep,
came
and we
from
got all the
yeah.
information from Ukraine. Maybe Spotify will be DDoS tonight. Who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah,
Hopefully you get
because
this
we mentioned
episode.
Ukraine on here. So that's it. That's
Yep.
a DDoS.
Yep.
DDoS
Rocket
coming.
Jesus is not going to like this. Actually, the title of this episode, if you're still listening, will be called Rocket Jesus and Boba. And so,
I'm
yeah.
I'm in. I'm in.
All
I
right.
would I would listen to that even if I wasn't in it.
We'll see you guys later. Bye.